High above the war-torn clouds of Europe, something happened that no pilot training had prepared them for. These were not rookies. They were experienced German fighter pilots, men who had flown through flak, fire, and death without hesitation. Yet on this mission, their hands froze on the controls. Radio channels filled with broken voices, half-finished warnings, and then, silence. What they saw in the sky did not behave like any enemy aircraft. It moved without sound. Without formation. Without logic. Moments later, aircraft turned back without orders. Others landed shaking, refusing to speak. And for the first time in the history of the Luftwaffe, pilots openly refused to fly again. Official reports would later call it confusion. Stress. Battle fatigue. But the men who were there knew the truth. Something was waiting for them in the sky. During the Second World War, fear was a constant companion in the skies of Europe. Every mission meant engines screaming, anti-aircraft fire tearing through clouds, and the knowledge that survival was never guaranteed. Yet German pilots were trained to push fear aside. They were conditioned to obey orders without hesitation. To fly, even when logic said they should turn back. The Luftwaffe was built on discipline, precision, and absolute control. Its pilots were considered among the most elite airmen of the war. Men who had faced overwhelming odds and returned without question. Men who believed that nothing in the sky could truly surprise them anymore. That belief did not last. In the later years of the war, reports began to surface, quietly at first. Whispers of strange encounters during routine missions. Objects that did not appear on radar. Movements that defied known aircraft behavior. And moments of silence where radio communication simply vanished. What began as isolated incidents soon formed a disturbing pattern. A pattern so unsettling that seasoned pilots chose disobedience over flight. This is not a story of defeat by enemy fire. It is the story of something unseen that broke the confidence of men trained never to break. By the time the war reached its most violent phase, the skies over Europe had become a second battlefield. One that never slept. One that demanded constant vigilance. For German pilots, the air war was not just about combat. It was about endurance. Long hours trapped in cramped cockpits. Frozen hands gripping metal controls. Eyes scanning endless clouds for a threat that could appear in seconds. The Luftwaffe had once dominated these skies. Early victories had created a sense of confidence, even superiority. Pilots were trained relentlessly, pushed beyond exhaustion, and taught that hesitation meant death. Every maneuver was drilled until it became instinct. Every emotion was meant to be suppressed. Fear had no place in the cockpit. Missions followed a brutal routine. Take off before dawn. Climb into hostile airspace. Engage or evade. Return, if possible. Anti-aircraft fire burst like black flowers around their aircraft. Enemy fighters appeared without warning. Engines failed. Wings burned. Men vanished into clouds and were never seen again. And yet, pilots kept flying. Losses were expected. Death was accepted. Refusal was unthinkable. By the mid-war years, pressure intensified. Fuel shortages. Overworked crews. Inexperienced replacements sent into the sky too soon. Still, orders came. And pilots obeyed. What made the coming events so disturbing was not the danger itself. German pilots were used to danger. It was the familiarity of it. But during certain missions, something felt different. The sky itself seemed wrong. Not hostile in a conventional way. But unsettling. Veteran pilots, men with dozens of missions, began reporting unease before even encountering the enemy. An unshakable tension. A sense of being watched. At first, these feelings were ignored. Attribution was made to fatigue. To stress. to nerves worn thin by years of combat. Yet the reports did not stop. They grew. Quietly. Persistently. And soon, the battlefield in the sky would confront them with something no training manual had ever mentioned. The mission began like countless others before it. Clear orders. Defined coordinates. A familiar flight path through hostile airspace. There was nothing unusual during takeoff. Engines performed normally. Weather conditions were stable. Radio communication was clear. At altitude, the formation settled into routine silence. Only the hum of engines. Only the endless stretch of clouds below. Then something changed. One pilot noticed it first. A shape in the distance. Too dark to be cloud. Too controlled to be smoke. He reported it over the radio. No immediate response. Others had not seen it yet. Seconds later, another pilot spoke. Then another. Different positions. Same description. The object did not approach like an aircraft. It did not follow known attack patterns. It did not climb or dive as expected. It moved sideways. Smoothly. Silently. No engine noise. No exhaust trail. No visible wings. As pilots attempted to adjust formation, radio interference began. Words cut off mid-sentence. Static replaced communication. Commands became fragments. Some instruments started behaving erratically. Altitude readings fluctuated. Compass needles spun. Training demanded engagement or evasive action. But neither option made sense. There was nothing to lock onto. Nothing to identify. The object, or objects, seemed to observe rather than attack. Maintaining distance. Matching speed without effort. One pilot attempted pursuit. His aircraft shuddered violently. Controls stiffened. He broke off immediately. Panic crept in. Not the sudden kind. The slow, paralyzing realization that this situation was beyond understanding. Then came the silence. Entire radio channels went dead. Not jammed. Not distorted. Simply gone. In that moment, pilots were alone. Separated by clouds. Separated by fear. Without orders, aircraft began turning back. Not in formation. Not in coordination. But instinctively. Some pilots landed pale and shaking. Others sat in their cockpits long after engines stopped. Hands trembling. Eyes fixed forward. When questioned, their reports were inconsistent in detail. But identical in emotion. They spoke of unease. Of pressure. Of a presence that did not belong in the sky. Most disturbing of all was what happened next. When new missions were assigned, several pilots refused. Not quietly. Not privately. Open refusal. Men who had survived dozens of combat missions chose defiance instead of flight. Not because of enemy fire. But because of what they had encountered above the clouds. Whatever had appeared in the sky that day had not fired a single shot. Yet it accomplished something no Allied fighter ever could. It broke the will of trained combat pilots. The effects of the encounter did not fade after landing. They followed the pilots back to the airfields. Into briefing rooms. Into restless nights without sleep. Veteran airmen who once laughed off danger now avoided eye contact. Some spoke in short, controlled sentences. Others refused to speak at all. Mechanics noticed trembling hands. Medical officers recorded elevated heart rates. Pilots complained of pressure headaches and blurred vision. Yet physical symptoms were not the greatest concern. It was the fear that lingered. Men described the sky as different now. Not hostile. But watchful. They spoke of the sensation of being observed. Of something intelligent. Something patient. Commanders initially dismissed these reactions. Combat stress was common. Fatigue was expected. But the consistency of the accounts became impossible to ignore. Pilots who had never flown together described the same feelings. The same silence. The same unnatural movement. When new missions were assigned, hesitation appeared. Briefing rooms grew quiet. Eyes dropped to the floor. Then came the refusals. At first, they were individual. A single pilot requesting reassignment. Another claiming illness. Soon, refusals became open. Direct. Unapologetic. Men stated plainly that they would not fly again. Not into that part of the sky. Not under those conditions. For a military built on obedience, this was unthinkable. Refusal was a crime. A violation of everything the Luftwaffe represented. Commanders reacted with anger. With disbelief. With threats of punishment. None of it worked. These were not cowards. They were men who had already faced death repeatedly. What they feared now was different. It could not be seen clearly. It could not be fought. Some pilots requested ground duty. Others accepted imprisonment over flight. The most disturbing detail was this. Even pilots who had not witnessed the incident began refusing missions. Fear spread through stories. Through whispers. The sky had gained a reputation. And once that fear took hold, it proved impossible to erase. The reaction from German command was swift. And unforgiving. Refusal to fly was not treated as fear. It was treated as insubordination. Pilots were summoned individually. Questioned behind closed doors. Their reports compared line by line. Officers searched for inconsistencies. For exaggeration. For any sign of weakness. Official explanations were prepared quickly. Navigation errors. Weather anomalies. Battle fatigue. Anything that could be written down. Anything that could be filed away. Medical evaluations followed. Some pilots were grounded temporarily. Others were threatened with court-martial. No official document mentioned strange objects. No record acknowledged radio silence beyond technical failure. The word unknown was carefully avoided. Orders were issued. Discussions of the incident were forbidden. Reports were classified. Pilots were instructed to forget what they had seen. To return to duty. To fly as before. But silence does not erase memory. Even as command attempted to contain the situation, rumors spread. Airfields were small worlds. Whispers moved faster than official orders. Pilots began altering routes on their own. Avoiding certain altitudes. Avoiding certain sectors of the sky. Command noticed the change in behavior. Fuel consumption increased. Mission efficiency declined. Punishments followed. Reassignments. Demotions. Still, compliance did not return. The sky had lost its predictability. And predictability was everything in air combat. Faced with a mystery they could not explain, command chose denial. Not investigation. Not transparency. Reports were sealed. Witnesses were dispersed. The incident was buried beneath paperwork and procedure. Official history would move on. Victories. Defeats. Numbers. But among those who had flown that day, the truth remained. Something had entered the sky. And the Luftwaffe was not prepared to confront it. With official reports sealed and witnesses silenced, the incident did not disappear. It shifted into speculation. Into theory. Into questions without answers. One explanation pointed to technology. The war had accelerated innovation at an unprecedented pace. Experimental aircraft were constantly being tested. Could the pilots have encountered a secret Allied project? An aircraft designed to fly silently. To move in ways unfamiliar to trained eyes. Some historians suggest advanced electronic warfare. Radio disruption. Instrument interference. Psychological disorientation induced by unknown methods. Yet this theory leaves gaps. Technology still obeys physical limits. Engines produce sound. Aircraft require lift. The object described did not behave like any known machine. Another explanation focused on psychology. Combat fatigue had reached extreme levels by this stage of the war. Pilots were exhausted. Malnourished. Overworked. The mind, under prolonged stress, can misinterpret reality. Shadows become threats. Silence becomes presence. But this explanation, too, struggles. The pilots were not inexperienced. Their reports were independent. Their descriptions consistent. A third theory ventured into the unexplained. Rare atmospheric phenomena. Unusual light refraction. Electrical disturbances at high altitude. Natural events can create illusions. Shapes without form. Movement without mass. Even so, none fully explain the behavior observed. The matching speed. The deliberate distance. The complete lack of aggression. What troubled investigators most was this. The object did not attack. It observed. And observation implies intent. No physical wreckage was ever recovered. No confirmed identification was made. The incident remains officially unresolved. Historians continue to debate it quietly. Scientists acknowledge its anomalies cautiously. And the pilots who lived through it carried their certainty to the grave. They did not claim to know what it was. Only that it did not belong in the sky they knew. The incident faded from official records, but it never truly disappeared. It lingered in memories. In silence. In the uneasy pause before takeoff. For the Luftwaffe, the effect was subtle but real. Confidence weakened. Morale shifted. Trust in the sky was broken. Pilots continued to fly, but something had changed. Missions were approached with caution rather than certainty. Briefings were followed more carefully. Routes were chosen with greater hesitation. The war moved forward. Battles were won and lost. History recorded numbers, dates, and outcomes. It did not record fear. The incident became one of many unexplained wartime anomalies. Stories shared quietly. Never officially acknowledged. After the war, surviving pilots rarely spoke publicly. Some dismissed the experience as something better left buried. Others hinted at it in memoirs. Always vaguely. Historians reviewing declassified material would later find gaps. Missing reports. Redacted passages. References that led nowhere. What remains is not evidence, but impact. A moment when trained warriors reached a psychological limit. Not because of enemy fire. But because certainty failed them. War depends on predictability. On understanding the battlefield. That day, the sky refused to be understood. And perhaps that is why the story endures. Not because it offers answers. But because it reminds us that even in an age of machines and strategy, there are moments when human perception encounters something beyond explanation. The war eventually ended. The aircraft were grounded. The airfields fell silent. But the sky remained. Clouds still drifted over the same routes where fear once took hold. The same altitude. The same empty space. What happened there was never fully explained. No enemy was identified. No victory was claimed. Only a moment survived. A moment when seasoned pilots chose refusal over obedience. When courage met something it could not define. History often remembers explosions and heroics. It rarely remembers hesitation. Yet hesitation can be the most honest reaction of all. Those pilots did not speak of monsters or miracles. They spoke of certainty breaking apart. Of realizing that not everything in war can be named or defeated. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is this. Whatever they encountered did not return. It did not need to. Its presence was enough. Because from that day on, the sky was no longer just a battlefield. It was a reminder. Somewhere above the clouds, there are stories still watching us.